Representatives has given cement manufacturers in the country a 2-week ultimatum to appear before the parliament to explain the arbitrary increase in the price of cement or face legislative action. This was during a joint investigative hearing where lawmakers expressed worry over the rise in cement cost. Idong Joseph reports.
Events that led to the arbitrary increase in the price of cement has become a source of untold hardship to citizens. With Nigeria having a 30 million housing deficit, including poor infrastructure, the continuous increase in the price of cement poses a major challenge for the housing sector. In the light of this, Nigeria's parliament resolved to bring critical stakeholders in the sector to discuss ways and means to end the hike and find solutions to the challenges affecting cement manufacturers.
Whatever touches cement in Nigeria touches the rest of us. So the need to talk about it cannot be overemphasized. Therefore, this hearing arises from the House of Representatives' deep concern for the people it represents and the need for transparent engagement with key stakeholders.
This is not in any way a witch hunt, but an open discourse with a view to finding lasting solutions to our problem within the built environment.
As the House of Representatives Joint Committee investigating the arbitrary increase in the price of cement commenced its public hearing, only 2 among the stakeholders invited appeared. The lawmakers expressed the displeasure over the non-appearance of about 12 other cement manufacturers.
We saw in Lagos where you have Nigerians under the bridge and paying rent. Why? If this product were available, I do not believe we would have to go to those lengths. More so that God has blessed us with these resources in abundance. So as is the resolution of this joint committee, we are giving them 14 days from now, and not 14 working days, 14 effective days, to make sure that they make their submissions and appear before this House.
With the absence of key stakeholders in the cement value chain, the Joint Committee was unable to continue with its duty and adjourned to the 20th of May. In Abuja for News Central, I am Idong Joseph.
Now to discuss the cybersecurity levy and SERP's rejection of it, we have with us Temitope Kolade, Senior Manager and Lead ESG and Climate Change Service at Anderson. You're welcome. Good afternoon, Kolade. How the introduction of this levy, how it's going to influence operational expenses for financial banks and also entities?
Okay, actually, I think for banking institutions, it's not meant to impact their operational expenses as much, particularly because there are clear exemptions in the Act and in the provisions of the Act, and includes things around intra-bank transfers, things around transactions involving banks' internal accounts, suspense accounts, clearing accounts, and all of that. So expectedly, it shouldn't impact on the bank's operations in themselves. But when it comes to other businesses, apparently it would, except for the fact that there are also exemptions when it comes to things around salary payments and loans and all of those, right? But in terms of, I think it's down to individuals and the sort of the businesses that would have to make some value transactions, and then you have to be paying maybe about 5,000 on a million for every transfer that you make, and that could be a lot going forward with all other transaction costs that's people already suffer on transfers.
Okay, so is there a middle ground for both the institutions and then the customers, whereby they could try to adhere to this cybersecurity levy without potentially impacting the customers and their transactions or the services to customers?
Really and truly, I think, yes, there could be some midpoint somewhere, right? But it's going to be a bit tough because again, this is the law, this is the levy, and it's meant to impact on how people really do business.
Okay, then. So regarding the eligibility of the regulation, is there a way or perhaps maybe standards that regulatory bodies could employ to assess eligibility for exemptions from the cybersecurity levy?
So you talked about the exemptions. I didn't quite get that.
So I'm asking if there might be a way whereby bodies could employ, to try and assess the eligibility for exemptions from the cybersecurity levy, particularly with specific exemptions for certain transaction types, and how will that oversee and enforce these criteria?
Okay, apparently it's the bank's jobs, and if you already go into the platforms of some of the banks, part of the fields that you would see to fill in are fields around the purpose of a transaction. And I think that once people have the purpose of the transactions to fill in, then it's easy for the banks to determine if those transactions qualify for the exemptions or not.
Okay. So that aside now, let's talk about these funds after they've been gotten. Following the growing frequent cyber attacks that we've been having on financial institutions, the funds that are raised through the cybersecurity levy, how will they be distributed to bolster cybersecurity infrastructure and capabilities within the banking industry?
It's asked to say, and the reason is because the Act typically provides or basically provides that the fund is going to the office of the NSA. And so the banks have been dealing with cybersecurity in the way they could best deal with it before now. So it's unlikely. I find it difficult to see how the NSA is going to redirect the funds to the banks to use it to deal with the cybersecurity challenges that they do have. Except that the government really does have anything in plans on how to deal with this, because the fund is going to the NSA really.
So it is assumed that this is supposed to perhaps maybe put some infrastructure in place. That's why customers are being levied with this amount now, isn't it? What exactly could that apparatus be like? What exactly are we looking at them building perhaps?
Usually what the banks are doing is that they do have the infrastructure, they have capacity building for their staff, they have data protection trainings, and they have a lot of work that they do from that point of view, right? When you talk about infrastructure, expectedly we'd also see that maybe government will begin to put certain things in place to ensure that when messages are sent, there is something to monitor messages at one point or the other, and maybe that would help. But it's challenging to see how the funds will be redirected from the Office of the National Security Advisor to individual organizations to ensure that they do that. I think for the most part, the banks will continue to do what they're already doing. Maybe they could do better going forward.
Well, thank you very much, Temitope Kolade, for joining us and giving us or shedding a little light on the matter. Thank you. Now, the Rivers State government has dismissed a call on the State House of Assembly by the Caretaker Committee of the All Progressive Congress in the state to commence impeachment proceedings against Governor Siminalayi Fubara. Commissioner for the Information, Joseph Johnson, said the governor would not allow anyone to throw the state into anarchy. The leader of the Pan-Niger Delta Forum, Edwin Clark, and other prominent individuals in the region have also warned the lawmakers against causing anarchy in the state. The APC Caretaker Committee chairman in the state, Tony Okocha, had on Tuesday called on the 27 members of the State House of Assembly loyal to the FCT minister, Nyesom Wike, to immediately commence an impeachment process against Fubara. To security matters now. Away from that, the Nigerian Army officers of the Short Service Commission and the Direct Service Commission from across the country have converged on Jos, the Plateau State capital, for a conversion examination that will better position them in the service. When concluded, this will be one of the major ways of increasing the number of combatant officers of the Army in fighting insurgency, as well as standing a chance for a longer service year in the military. News Central's Chizoba Nyanwe was at the opening ceremony of the conversion examination and now reports.
The Nigerian Army is working assiduously to stem insurgency in the country, as well as ensuring adequate security of lives and property. One of such measures is to increase the number of combatant personnel of the Nigerian Army in the fight against insurgency and other forms of criminality in the country. President of the Conversion Board, who also doubles as the General Officer commanding 3 Division, said the significance of the exercise cannot be overemphasized.
The conversion is very significant in the career progression of Nigerian Army officers, of the Short Service Commission and Direct Short Service Commission, especially those who want to continue in the service of the country after a particular service year, as provided for in the harmonized terms and conditions of service.
A total of 528 of these personnel won't just be examined on their physical efficiency, but also on other aspects as deemed fit by the Nigerian Army medical standards.
And during the assessment, you will undergo various physical, laboratory, and radiological examinations to determine your fitness based on the Nigerian Army medical standards. These tests will include evaluation for physical infirmities, eye test, blood infection, drug abuse, as well as organ function.
While urging them to put up every required armor, ranging from training, experience, among others, Major General Abubakar assured the board will uphold fairness in the discharge of this onerous task. The conversion exercise, which ends in 2 weeks, is for officers for the rank of lieutenants. In Jos for News Central, Chizoba Aniuwi.
Let's take a break now, but when we get back, more news. Welcome back. Now, the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms has proposed reviewing states and local governments' share of the value-added tax revenue to 90% and reducing the federal government's share from 15% to 10%. The panel also recommended an upward review of the current 7.5% rates charged to customers. The chairman of the committee, Taiwo Yedele, disclosed this at a stakeholders' exposure and impact assessment session organized to discuss some of the major proposals in the national tax policy in Abuja. The proposals were part of the reforms being introduced to boost the nation's tax revenue. Now, to discuss this, we are joined by a chartered accountant, Akin Fatoke. You're welcome, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mazino. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, sir, we have to ask, how will increasing states and local governments' share of VAT revenue from 10% to 90% impact their spending priorities and potential for economic growth? And are there specific areas where this additional revenue could be most effective?
This is a form of physical federalism, again, being in practice. More resources being devolved more to the states, which has been the crying axe for people who have always been asking for restructuring. If you will recall, states were going on some 35% local government, on some 15% in total. By the time you now add then the federal, everything will make up the arithmetical 100. But what the Taiwo Yedele harmonization is now asking for is that can we change it around? Change the federal to 10 and then increase the colossal that goes to the states and local governments by 90%. I think it's going to be a welcome development. You don't get anything if you continue to do the same things and expecting different results. I believe strongly that a lot of the aid should be at the local government and at the state levels. And I think, if you ask me, it's something we should strive for. The downside to that, of course, will be the fact that we are still talking about sharing, and not the other way around of baking the cake. My expectation is that when this is put in place, the states, hopefully, when we are now agitating, say, for instance, for state police, if it comes to be, and then looking at the resources that reside within the states to research, develop, harness, and bring them to fruition so that they can have some quantifiable things to bring to the center. I think it's like a step that we should shift, a paradigm shift, really, that we should try and see how that helps us. I think the VAT allocation that the federal has been getting, in my honest opinion, especially if you look at the sharing formula that has detailed it, whereby sometimes maybe some of those states who are really not producing high enough are getting wide some. When we get into the nitty-gritty, we might begin to now then decide to sift and see. So, like the wiper of a motor vehicle in the rains, wipe to the right, wipe to the left. The advantages are some of the things that I've just mentioned. The disadvantages would be states who really do not produce. Should they be taking virtually anything? Because if you don't cook, if you don't produce, really you should not eat. But let's look at it from
okay, so I see what you're saying there, prorates according to what the states are producing. But given the proposed increase in VAT rates, can you analyze how it might affect different business sectors and consumer behavior?
Oh, naturally. I know that some state governors, for instance, have taken a decision that the way they want to spend their monies will be to be looking backwards from the perspective of some other state governors who wants to now move forward. My point of the fact that we have different cultures, different values, different cliches, and our focus are a little bit different. And so if you believe that it is primary education that you want to get into, so be it, get into it. If you believe that it's industrialization that you want to get into, so why not? And your VAT should now be properly applied there. I mean, if you have factor endowment to look at agriculture as, for instance, in Niger State, that can fit the whole of the West African sub-region, if they apply what they have solely and tangentially into agriculture, the returns will be unquantifiable, so to speak. What that does is that your area of strength and where you have what you want to describe as the non-oil resources that you can deploy and develop. In Kogi State, for instance, we should be looking at getting more monies into that state and then getting the Ajaokuta still back into life. The hydro that we have in Zungeru, for instance, will now then be that should now be the priority. And Abia, that is already showing some kind of positive sign to be able to give light through the geometrics. That should be those areas. And so water will naturally find its level.
Yeah, well, I hear what you're saying, but what about the states that produce, well, close to nothing, that have very scarce resources? How is it gonna go well for these states? What are they gonna do? What's the government, or what do you suggest the government's suggestion would be for these states?
Now, the sharing formula, again, will have to change. We started, I know that my dear brother, Taiwo Idili, we also have this at the back of their minds. There should be a base allocation that goes to the states. No, there should be a formula that says, look, okay, all states take a particular percentage within the 90 that we are looking at. And then another set of percentage will now be on derivation, what you bring onto the table, your internally generated kind of revenue. How easy is it to do trade and get surplus and interstate trading? And how advisable is it that you should open up and not get yourself closed? So if you are the ones that is still looking backwards and not doing as well, then you get a little bit of percentage compared to the others. And of course, you know, population-wise, even though we know our numbers, our data print is not sacrosanct, we need to now begin to seriously look at how to get a good population census within the states. The states should be able to do population census in a way and manner to show how many people there are within the geographical areas. That is in no way saying other indigenous cannot reside there, but it will be properly delineated. So if at the end of the day, the way you are leading your question, I think it's a very good question. One has to be very diplomatic, and the truth must be told here and now. In my honest opinion, there are quite a number of states that are not viable, and I don't know whether they should continue to be states in the real sense of it. Of course, we are not talking about expanding the number of states we should have.
Thank you for your honesty, sir. That was very honest of you. Thank you very much, Sir Akin Fatunke.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Now to health matters. Nurses and midwives in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, have expressed worry over the modalities and procedures set by the nation's Nurses and Midwifery Council for the verification of nurses in the country. This was made known in Abuja as they took to the streets of the capital, saying several stringent conditions have been put in place which are affecting their practice and stalling their professional development. Amadin Uyu reports.
The protest commenced from the Federal Secretariat in Abuja. The protesters, aggrieved nurses and midwives, said they want the federal government to intervene in the crisis affecting the Nurses and Midwifery Council of Nigeria over stringent conditions set for the re-verification of nurses.
The verification is not them ascertaining if you're working well. Verification, they are just asking you, are these people registered? Have they written the Nursing and Midwifery Council exam and have they passed? Do they have a license to practice? If yes, is their name on your portal? That is just the verification, and that is what they are asking for. Yet they said we need all these things, and that is what we are saying no to. These things weren't there, so it just came up all of a sudden.
They say the conditions are now affecting their professional development.
Now nobody is being verified, and most of our nurses have missed out on opportunities that they've had. Some that want to continue their education, now they've gotten a letter from where they got admission that they cannot continue with them, which is why we are crying out again, because we are calling on our fathers and mothers. We know they have children that are nurses also, that they should come to our aid and talk to Nursing and Midwifery Council, that they should reopen the portal and verify nurses the same way it used to be, and not with the new guidelines.
A member of the House Committee on Health Institutions, who was out to receive the aggrieved nurses, assured that their grievances will be looked into.
Once you put down your request again, we'll call the necessary authority and look into this matter. And I'm assuring you, we will not wait. I'm assuring you by tomorrow, we will put a call to all the relevant authority and sit with them and see how to address your situation. We are also going to look at it, and even whatever the government needs to put in place must be according to the law. Yeah, nobody is going to be harassed, nobody is going to be bullied, nobody is going to be intimidated.
The nurses are also calling for the employment of more hands into the nation's health sector, saying the lack of hands has been affecting their performance. In Abuja for News Central, I am Amadine Uyi.
Now, in a move to revamp the education system in Nigeria's northeast, Borno State Governor Professor Babagana Zulum has flagged off the training of nearly 2,000 teachers. The candidates were found to be trainable after a competency test conducted by the authorities. Our correspondent Umaru Kirawa completes the report.
Education remains one of the worst hit sector due to insurgency in Nigeria's northeast. In Borno State alone, over 600 teachers were murdered within the span of 12 years. With so many anomalies in the sector, which are not limited to unqualified teachers, discrepancies in salary, among others at the basic education level. The government now flags off intensive training of teachers across the state at the Wakabiu College of Education in Biu local government area.
There's no any government in the history of Borno State which has actually touched our life like this one. Today, a total of 1,872 teachers have registered for our training session. Among them are 702 SSCE holders to undergo 2 years, 6-semester program.
Remain focused and do what is right. As long as everyone you are doing is right, it doesn't matter whether you are alone or everybody is with you.
Governor Zulum highlighted the importance of investing in the professional development of teachers, as they are the cornerstone of any successful education system.
This number that are to be trained here in Wakabiu form part of the 6,227 teachers that were considered trainable during the last competency test analysis.
A wannan gwamnatin duk education secretaries a yi musu mota, an ajiye musu kuɗi saboda a kula da yaran mu kusan biliyan.
The state government will convert the teachers who perform poorly during the training to non-academic staff instead of retrenching them.
All the trainees will receive 30,000 naira on a monthly basis for the 3 months, and even those that will be trained for 2 years will receive an allowance scholarship of 30,000 naira on a monthly basis. That means government will be spending 300 million naira on a monthly basis for this training.
The aim is to equip the teachers with the necessary expertise they need to deliver engaging and effective lessons, ultimately improving learning outcomes for students across the state. In Biu for News Central, Umaru Kirawa.
Coming up, no casualties recorded as apartment block caves in Kenya. We'll bring you the details after the break. Welcome back. Now, the African Union has condemned the Israeli military's move into southern Gaza's Rafah. AU Commission Chief Moussa Faki Mahamat in a statement expressed extreme concern at the war undertaken by Israel in Gaza, which results at every moment is massive deaths and systemic destruction of the conditions of human life. He called on the entire international community to effectively coordinate collective action to stop what he describes as a deadly escalation of the war. The United Nations and Israel's staunchest ally, the United States, both condemned the closure of the crossing, which are a lifeline for civilians facing looming famine. Now, the United Nations has voiced concerns after dozens of cases of cholera were reported in Kenya, which has been hit by weeks of destructive rains and floods. The World Health Organization on Wednesday said 44 cases of the disease have been reported in Tana River County in eastern Kenya, one of the areas hardest hit by widespread flooding. According to latest government figures, flooding in Kenya has killed 238 people, while more than 200,000 have been made homeless. Overall, the heavier than usual seasonal rains, compounded by the El Nino weather phenomenon, have claimed the lives of more than 400 people in East Africa, a region highly vulnerable to climate change. And still in Kenya, all 34 residents have been found alive after a 5-story building in Nairobi's Mountain View ward collapsed late Tuesday night. The building is located along Naivasha Road near the International Livestock Research Institute. As the tenants awaited help, some of them jumped through the window before the building was destroyed. In one of the houses, a fire had begun, but it burnt out without spreading to other houses. First responders from Kenya Red Cross and firefighters from the Nairobi City County collaborated in the rescue efforts. Nairobi County Disaster Management Chief Officer Bramwell Simiyu said the cause of the collapse remains unknown, but detailed investigations will commence on Wednesday. Now, the European Union has condemned Chad's failure to allow nearly 3,000 civil society members financed by the EU to observe the presidential election. 4 civil society associations, including the Chadian Human Rights League, hit out at the Derby-appointed Electoral Commission for refusing to accredit 2,900 of their representatives as voting observers. Opponents of junta leader and presidential candidate Mahatma Idris Deby Itno had called for a boycott, dismissing Monday's ballot as fixed. International rights groups had also warned that the vote was not expected to be free or fair after a crackdown on the opposition. Meanwhile, General Deby has hailed the vote as a turning point in laying the roots of a culture of democracy in Chad. And in South Africa, the South African Electoral Commission has rejected a request to remove former President Jacob Zuma as the leader of the newly formed Umkhonto weSizwe party. It was responding to a letter by founder of MK Party Jubulani Khumalo, who wanted the commission to remove Zuma as the face of the party and from its list of potential members of parliament. Khumalo, who was recently expelled from the party, said Zuma fraudulently occupied the position as leader of the new party. But in a statement on Tuesday, the Independent Electoral Commission said it does not interfere with political parties' internal affairs and confirmed that Zuma remained a registered leader of the MK party. Still in South Africa, where rescue operations are still underway in George in search of those who are still stuck under the rubble of a building that collapsed on Monday. We also understand that the death toll has risen to 7. About 75 construction workers were on site when the building collapsed. So far, 36 individuals have been moved and 39 others are still under the debris. The building is said to have still been under construction. Medical, or rather emergency services, are also still on site. Earlier, the mayor of George, Leon Van Wyk, spoke to us on the developing matters.
Yes, the rescue operations are continuing, and we're now reaching the stage where we're getting close to 48 hours after the collapse took place at 2 p.m. on Monday afternoon. So that's just under 4 hours, 3 hours away, and the international standards on this type of rescue operation is for 72 hours, and in that period of time you want to try and get as many rescues and get people out alive as possible. So naturally this has been a very delicate operation because you've got a 5-story building that has collapsed, and you've got the various floors and that have now fallen down on each other, and to try and break through that level of concrete and those concrete slabs is actually very difficult. So the teams have been working very hard at trying to penetrate and to work through that concrete to take people out. I think the last rescue was at about 1:30 a.m.
Now, 8 bodyguards of South Africa's Deputy President Paul Mashatile are back in court for pre-trial proceedings. They were involved in a blue light mafia assault last year. The men face 11 charges and are currently out on a 10,000 rand bail. The charges include assault, malicious damage to property, defeating the ends of justice, and also pointing a firearm. The former VIP Presidential Protection Unit officers were filmed assaulting off-duty soldiers on the side of the N1 highway in 2023. Now, some Brazilians have set up a makeshift shelter on a pedestrian bridge after torrential rains caused flooding and forced them to evacuate their homes in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. The worst natural calamity ever to hit the state has claimed at least 95 lives, with 372 people reported injured and 131 still missing. Nearly 400 municipalities have been hit, including state capital Porto Alegre, while with more than 160,000 people forced to leave their homes as streets have transformed into rivers after days of record-breaking rain. Porto Alegre is home to some 1.4 million people, and the large metropolitan area has more than double that number.
Eu me abriguei aqui porque a água acho que não vai vir realmente nessa altura aqui, né? E aqui eu tenho bom, ali eles estão trazendo alimento para nós, tem tudo médico ali também para atender as pessoas doentes e tem alimento.
Mas fomos obrigados a deixar ali que foi tudo tomado pela água. A gente tentou esperar até onde deu, mas não teve jeito. O exército foi ali e resgatou nós. Nossos cachorrinhos que estão lá embaixo também, até gatinho que a gente tem, a gente deixou aqui também. Aí a gente vai ficar aqui, que a gente está perto de casa, né? Mas em último caso.
And now sports. Nigerian wrestler Mercy Genesis has departed Nigeria for Istanbul for the World Olympic qualifiers with hopes of booking a spot at the Olympic Games. Mercy Genesis, who narrowly missed out on qualification at the last Africa Oceania Olympic wrestling qualifiers in Alexandria, Egypt, would be hoping to become the latest Nigerian athlete to secure Olympic qualification in Istanbul, Turkey, where the World Olympic qualifiers will take place. The multiple African champion was accompanied by coach Ako Purity and will begin her quest on Friday the 10th of May against high-profile wrestlers in the world that missed out on an Olympic ticket in their regional windows. The qualifier in Istanbul will offer 54 Olympic quarters in all 6 weight classes of the 3 styles. And the Nigerian Women's Football League has announced Bayelsa State as the host of the 2023-24 NWFL Premiership Super 6. The NWFL Premiership Titles Championship is scheduled to take place from Thursday 16th to Sunday 26th of May 2023 in Yenagoa, Bayelsa State. Bayelsa was confirmed as host by the NWFL Chairman Nkechi Obi following a review of bid interests from various states to stage the playoff competition. Participating clubs are expected to arrive in Yenagoa on Thursday, the 16th of May 2024, followed by the draw and pre-match meeting to be held on Friday, 17th May 2024.
They maintain their NWFL status. The first goal of the game was scored by Adao Bioka off our corner kick from the right-hand side, as the PT forward headed home the first goal of the afternoon in Ikene. The visitors were hoping to hold the Remo Stars ladies to at least a point in which would be enough for them to maintain their NWFL status. The ladies from Accra were met by a top save from Charlotte Adje, the Ghanaian goalkeeper. The first half of the game will finish 1-0 in favor of the Remo Stars ladies team.
Nigerian champions Rivers Hoopers made it 3 wins out of 3 at the ongoing Sahara Conference of the Basketball Africa League, with a commanding 21 points blowout of former BAL champions US Monastir, as the Kingsmen ran out with an 84-64 victory on Tuesday. Rivers Hoopers started the game in rampant form, making back-to-back buckets. Hoopers remained prolific in shooting to wrap up the first quarter with a 9-point advantage at 25-16. Kelvin Amayo proved to be unplayable on the day, firing 3 straight threes in the final 4 minutes to give the Kingsmen a massive 20-point advantage with the scores 49-29 at halftime. That's all this hour. But before we go, let's take another look at some of the major stories. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu returns after 2 weeks abroad. SERAP rejects CBN directive on cybersecurity levy, gives government 48 hours to retreat. And dozens of cholera cases reported in flood-hit Kenya. Remember, you can send your eyewitness reports to the WhatsApp number on your screen currently. And do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and of course on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. My name is Mazino Appeal.